The following episode discusses topics that may not be suitable for younger audiences.
You know, I got hired around this time. I had probably had a dozen pieces or 15 pieces in the series. And I got hired to do work on a film that was shooting in an asylum, abandoned asylum. And it was a piece where they were using one of the cells as a prison cell or something in the scene of the movie. And they wanted someone to create a bunch of art because the prisoner who was in there for decades was an artist and loved to create. So I filled the cell with artwork. I just did a whole bunch of drawings, I think 200 or 300 or something, and filled the cell. And while I wasn't on set, I was just hanging out there. And I walked around the asylum going, oh, would this ever be cool to exhibit in? Because this is where we put people that we don't understand.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a surprise outbreak. Is the issue of pandemic.
No social distancing at all.
They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supply.
Where's the mask? Where's the glove?
A second wave is...
We all need some good news.
A message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand.
From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm Cheryl Halling. My guest joining me today, James Picard, is a master painter, poet, filmmaker, and humanitarian. He originally hails from Burlington, Ontario, Canada, and now makes his home between Vancouver, British Columbia, and Studio City, California. He's been creating works of art since his childhood, which led him to then study at Sheridan College and the Ontario College of Art and Design to become a world-renowned artist working in various mediums. James has also taught art at several renowned art universities and has published 3 books of his art. His work has been exhibited next to world-renowned art legends such as Picasso, Matisse, Miro, and Warhol. His use of ink, pencil, and Conte crayons to depict portraits of musical and historic icons such as Mozart, David Bowie, Shakespeare and Marlon Brando, to a whimsical series that James calls Duets, to his incredibly gifted use of oils to portray his Piano Room series, illustrates the depth and range of his remarkable talent. Having exhibited his artwork in galleries around the globe, it's his work that didn't make it into the traditional showrooms that garnered James the most attention. His Dark and Wounded series of paintings and their unusual staging in abandoned asylums, hospitals, and prisons, followed by the documentary of the same name, won numerous awards across the North American Film Festival circuit before culminating in a screening at the 71st Cannes Film Festival in 2018. After a long hiatus due to the pandemic, James is now resuming talks for this to become a feature film. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to James Picard to 19 Stories.
Thank you, Cheryl. Wow, that was quite the intro.
And that's it for our show, ladies and gentlemen.
That's it. Thank you. Nice to be here.
James, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing, and have you been able to collect all of your patio furniture that blew away yesterday?
Yeah, and thank goodness my umbrella was down. Otherwise, that might have pulled a Mary Poppins, and I might be searching for it right now. Yeah, a bit of a windstorm yesterday, but everything's good and collected.
I'm glad that we're all collected after a little bit of calamity getting together, but we're going to have a good time. I'm so delighted to talk with you after having a chance to admire your work for quite some time via one of the more popular social media sites that you so generously share your artwork on. And I was both intrigued and struck by the contrast of your Dark and Wounded series, because up until then, I've come to know your work through a fabulous range of beautiful creations that you post. And as I just mentioned in your intro, that you've been creating since you were a wee one. And I know that art created a bit of escape for you at the time. So would you mind sharing what you meant by that?
No, I don't mind at all. There was no real artists in my family per se. I was raised in a very tumultuous household with an alcoholic father. And throughout my childhood, we were pretty much all of us, the family were in survival mode, trying to survive the horrors of living in an abusive household with my father, who would, drink and, he would sort of black out and get violent, whether it be with my siblings or my mother or myself, and he would destroy my artwork. And, for me, drawing, I used to draw a lot. I could create worlds that were not my world. I could sort of create imagery and scenes. I was in school. The teachers would always say, "Oh, he's a daydreamer." And and that's what I did with my art. I would just draw and sketch and leave reality, because my reality at the time was not pleasant. So I would create imagery, and whether it be landscapes or whole other worlds that I could sort of immerse my brain into. I think it was more of a survival mechanism than anything else, but I've always carried that with me and continued to create throughout my life.
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. And I chuckled only because I've met so many creatives who've been told the same thing in school, that they're a daydreamer, that they kind of need to come back down to earth and apply themselves, if you will.
Yeah,
and,
but you're crap.
Yeah, because that daydreaming, as you said, is really what helped you get by. And I think it's okay to share like this in a podcast, because more and more people are acknowledging kind of the hurts of our past to help us heal our present and future. But my own father was highly, highly creative, but he was also an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't abusive, but he wasn't a happy drunk.
Yeah.
I think the more we can kind of talk about these things and connect is what gives us our common thread to look at how we can help each other heal. So perhaps we can just delve right into your Dark and Wounded series and your documentary and talk about your impetus for creating art that so acutely touches upon the pain that people, like we're talking about, the common pain people experience. And it also touches upon what this podcast is about, acknowledging fear and yet offering hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's sort of the whole premise of the Dark and Wounded series. It started, there's a tagline I put below the Dark and Wounded, was "Beyond fear, there's freedom," because it's fear that I feel tends to stop us from everything. Our growth, our personal growth, our spiritual growth, our emotional growth. It stops us from advancing into jobs, relationships. Fear affects everyone. And I think when I started off, like when I was younger, I remember I had a friend who, we got into all sorts of trouble together, and my father would, I'd show up the next day and I've got broken nose, and my father would lay a beating on me, and I would say, wow, did you not get beat? And he'd go, my father doesn't touch me. And I remember going, oh my God, there's a different reality going on here. And I felt quite alone. But, it's funny, the whole Dark and Wounded started when I was having just tea with a friend of mine who, it was around Thanksgiving, and she had said she hated going to Thanksgiving with her family. And I said, who doesn't? Everyone's so dysfunctional. Families are dysfunctional. And she said, yeah, but my dad raped me and my sister. And, so it's uncomfortable sitting across the table from him. My jaw just dropped, and I went, what? I couldn't even comprehend what she was saying. So your parents are still together, and this is just a family secret that you're sharing with me? This is insane. I have no words to describe. What?
Pass the gravy,
Exactly. Pass the gravy. Don't touch my hand. Well, it's nuts. And then I started thinking, as an artist and a human being, I feel very, I have a lot of empathy, and I needed to get this out. It just sat with me for days, and I thought, I got to paint something. This is horrific. And then I did that, and a few people saw the paintings and go, what the heck is that? And I started to find out, I was telling my assistant at the time, and then he started telling me a story about his father, how his father was abusive. And then I started seeing, this is a thread that runs, it's so common. It's more common than people realize, because people don't talk about it. And there's so much that goes on in your childhood that I really feel it stems from your childhood, and we don't address it. We don't talk about it. And there was a whole period of time where no one spoke about it. Men never talked about their feelings, though they were abused, or it's such a crazy dilemma that we have in our society. So that's how it started. And I started delving into my own darkness and my own past. And I started thinking about individually how we have wounds and darkness inside us. And if we don't address that darkness and those wounds, they will not heal. And it carries over throughout our lives. And it creates a multitude of coping mechanisms and behavior patterns that are just so destructive. And I started thinking societally, how that affects globally, like nationally, as a species. Where are we on the planet as a species with all this darkness and wounds that we constantly carry with us? And that led to the Dark and the Wounded series.
What's so interesting is prior to you doing that, I mean, anyone who looks at your artwork, it has such a depth and range and beauty and vibrancy. Even in your use of ink and pencil, or Conte crayons, you can see just the soul of who and what you create. So the fact that you were able to go from using all these beautiful colors and just even, like I say, even when you're using your ink and crayons to do that. And then you would think it would be reverse. Like, I mean, I could understand as an artist coming from an abusive household that Dark and Wounded would be what your art would be all about. So where did you draw the beauty that you then put on canvas and on paper?
Well, I think the world inherently is a beautiful place. I think humans mess it up, but I spent a lot of time alone as a child, and there's so much beauty out there. I mean, you sit and watch a sunset or just look at the way the clouds sit on the blue sky. Like there's a lot of beauty. And I think that's what saved me, was the beauty of the world and taking moments to really absorb it. And that's what I feel as an artist. You observe things. And I have this theory. A lot of people that, musicians I know and writers and actors they're very observant. I always ask them, like, how was your childhood? And the majority of them say they had a very rough childhood, because when you have something going, so like when your life is very smooth and you don't have any foreseeable problems or you choose to ignore them, like ignorance is bliss, you can see a lot of surface beauty in the world. And I think when you have adversity coming at you at various times, like your awareness level goes up, because when you're a child, you listen for the car key, or the car coming in the drive, or the keys opening the door, or your father's footsteps in the hallway. Like, you're aware, and you look at body language and gestures and how what's behind their eyes and how they look and what is the intonation of their voice. And there's so many clues that you look for, because you have to. That's how you're going to survive. Yeah. And I think as an artist, I carried that with me too. So I'm always like, I would pull the car over. I think I did that maybe a few weeks ago, where I saw the light from a street light hitting a tree, and the lighting was amazing. And I just stopped and just observed it for a while. And I just thought, that is so freaking beautiful. Like the shadows, and that's a beautiful moment. And it's those beautiful moments that make up life. And, it's funny, when I was studying art, I would go to a lot of art galleries, which is still my passion to do, though I haven't done it a lot with the pandemic. I would hate when people would walk through a gallery, or if people were with me and they just like bypass, there's a Caravaggio, a Rembrandt, a Picasso, a Matisse, whatever, and they go, oh yeah, nice, and into the next room. And I just go, oh my, observe, what are you doing? Like, this is life. Like, life, the beauty in life, you have to stop and you have to look at it. And to me, it's everywhere. Like a reflection in a puddle, a raindrop creating ripples in a puddle is a beautiful thing. So in my mind, there's a lot of darkness, but there's a lot of beauty as well. And I see that. And there's joy. I have a lot of joy in my life. And I have at times when it's sort of that adage where, you appreciate the sunny day when you get a lot of rain. When you've had a lot of crap in your life and you've had to, I don't know how many life-threatening places I was in with my father. I mean, just physically, like thinking, this is it, I'm going to die. And then when you don't die, you take a lot of things for what they are. Like, you can really see the beauty. And I think a lot of people, they want to go down the middle of the road, not too high, not too low, and they don't look. They're just constantly moving, constantly looking, money, future, and they're just gathering things, and they're distracted by stuff, but they don't stop and really see the beauty. And then it's funny because, you talk with someone who's got cancer or something, and all of a sudden they're not talking about money or their job. They're not talking about, when the doctor says, okay, you got 3 months to live. They're talking about, what do I want to do? Who do I need to see? Who do I want to be? Like, all the important things comes back. And I think my tumultuous childhood gave me that realization that life is fleeting and you need to really see the beauty as well as the darkness. So that's why I have good days and bad days like everyone else. And there's a lot of darkness, but there's a lot of beauty and light in the world. And I prefer to stay in the light if I can. I've been through enough darkness in my life.
Wow, there's so many beautiful things you just said in that, James. And I mean, I see, what I call God's grace on your life that way, because I would think it'd be so easy as someone who is abused to then grow up and be an abuser.
It is. I think, and I could have easily been in jail and said, well, yeah, I'm just violent because my father was violent. People go, well, okay, I get it. But it takes a lot of courage and strength and discipline to break that chain. And I think there's a responsibility to being here on the planet. There really is. And I see darkness everywhere, but I don't see everyone sort of fighting against it. We just sort of, as long as it doesn't affect us, then we try to ignore it. And until it does affect us, we don't want to take any steps to change anything.
So let's talk a moment about, going into that dark and wounded place, given all the beauty that you talked about. And I just want to backtrack for a second before we move forward. You mentioned two things. One of them was the light, just even pulling over and looking at light. To me, because I'm an amateur photographer, and light to me, I get so excited by just the way it could hit a wall or a tree or, just come through the leaves. And there's just taking that moment in and going, this is just, it's kind of just a slice of time that stops and allows everything to almost be sacred. Mm-hmm. And I see that in your art too. And you mentioned joy, and that's usually a question I ask towards the end of talking with someone, but what does bring you joy? I mean, obviously your artwork, the beauty in your artwork and, a lot of the things that you touched upon, but can you share a little bit about what brings you joy?
Yeah, I think it's quite simple in some ways. It's just being alive brings me joy. Like, I've had so many close calls with death, and I've been around death throughout my life quite a bit. And just waking up, like I do this little thing now where I say to myself what I'm grateful for in the morning. And I don't necessarily expect to wake up. Like, every single one of us, I feel, is one doctor's phone call, one medical test, one car drive away from death. It happens that quickly. And to be able to stay in that moment where you appreciate and value the simplest things in life. Like, I had a infection in my hand, and my left hand doesn't work properly anymore, and they were going to amputate it at one point.
Oh, wow.
And when I was in the hospital, and people go, oh, your hand, like, and you're in chronic pain, and you never complain. I said, I can walk. Like, life is truly a blessing if you stop. And I think the more you go through, the more you value every single day that you're here. And I appreciate the fact I make it through each day. And each day is a new day that I actually wake up and open my eyes and look around, and I can do whatever I want. I can change the narrative of my story in a split second. I can do it. Like, the freedom is unbelievable, that where I live and what I have the options for. And I haven't always been this way. Like, I mean, there was times where I was homeless and didn't have food. And so I really value where I am, and that brings me joy. And certain people, I have less of a connection with humans now than I used to, because I started to find out how dark people really are, and how they, what the Dark and Wounded tour and film did. It opened a communication for people to feel like, hey, I'm dark too. But it also opened up the Pandora's box of those really dark people. They gravitated to the whole project and what it was, and they're dark. So the people that I have close to me, they bring me joy. And life brings me joy by being alive and creating. The fact that I can create, that brings me joy as well.
What a wonderful way to have gratitude about saying, okay, if you lost the use of your hand, you can walk. But I would imagine the people around you were saying that because you're an artist, and they felt, an empathy towards you that, wow, you create. That's how you create. And yet we still, as you say, always have a choice. And I'm going to venture into something really sensitive. And if you don't want to share about it, I completely understand. But you touched upon seeing a lot of death in your life. And I've read that your own sister succumbed to an act of violence at the age of 19, and that you also lost a brother. I cannot imagine losing one sibling, let alone two, seems incomprehensible. So is this series, the Dark and Wounded series, a way to give voice to their suffering and shed light on, how we can be aware and look out for each other?
Yeah, it's basically when my sister passed away, we were so close. She was actually 21. I was 19
Oh,
at
I
the
see.
time.
Okay.
But that really, I remember waking up the next day because she died in New York, and I had to go to the morgue and ID the body. And I remember waking up at a hotel the next day and going, wow, I am here and she is not. And it's funny because I wasn't in a great place with my family. I was trying to go to art college. I didn't really know a lot of people. Like my family, we're all kind of displaced. And I felt that, wow, shiver lucky, like in a way, like it stops. Like when you die, you don't worry about, I need a coat or gloves or to keep warm. I don't pay rent on my credit cards. I don't pay bills. I don't do anything. Like it's a pretty good deal in a way. Like you get off scot-free. You just get to relax. It just stops. Like life as we know it stops. And it's not necessarily, I don't think death necessarily is a bad thing. And I think at times when I've had friends or family who are suffering, it's actually quite a good thing. Death is a good friend sometimes to have around when people need them, when people need death. And we fear death, but that's the one guarantee. This is the thing that is funny because I can't guarantee if you're going to be healthy, if you're going to have a job, if your marriage is going to last, if your car is not going to get stolen. Like there's no guarantees. Death guarantees.
Sure.
You're going to die. We all will die. That being said, when my sister died, I started to think like my life, I want to live it for her as well. And I want to do good. I want to sort of try and leave the world a better place than when I arrived. And I grew up in, like I said, such a abusive, insane childhood. Like I just want to leave the world a better place. And the first thing was to break that chain that my father and his father beat him. And, it was a chain that came down. And with my kids, I never, it stopped right there. And it's a choice we make. It's not always easy. With the Dark and the Wounded, it became, a voice for those who cannot speak or who have had their voice taken away for whatever reason. I wanted to give a voice to people, either from the past or present or even the future who don't necessarily have the freedoms or the ability to speak. That was the whole intention of The Dark and Wounded, which became like a short documentary. And the feature, I want to focus more on the light than the dark because it is about changing. Though I had a lot of more optimism, I think, when I started the project than I do now towards humanity.
Thank you for sharing a bit about that, James. When we talk about these really tough things in life, I think it helps other people who they just could be listening going, wow, there is hope beyond this existence, of what I'm dealing with right now. And like you say, sometimes death is welcome for some people, the alternative to their reality. And yet to find the beauty that you have found is really encouraging, and especially stopping the legacy of violence in your own family. And in regards to your feature film, will it be a full-length documentary, or are you looking for kind of a dramatic theatrical release in making it full-length?
Yeah, it'll be a full-length documentary. And I've already started to contact people who have gone through a lot of darkness and come out on the other side in a much more enlightened, positive way. And I honestly felt like it's funny because when I started this project, I thought, and maybe just trying to be maybe I was a little bit naive in a way, because I thought, well, there are people that have issues and problems and they are caught in their wounds and their darkness, but there's good in everyone. And now I don't think there is good in everyone. I think there are some people that are too far gone, and we have a world that's full of sociopathic, psychopathic, crazy people. There's a lot of people out there, like these protests that have just recently been happening with the pandemic, and people saying, change the mandates and my rights are being taken away. And, it's funny because like, again, it only when it affects someone personally that they feel like, hang on a second, I can't go to a movie theater if I don't have a vaccination. Whoa, hang on. This is affecting me now. But what about violence against women? That's prevalent. What about childhood hunger or childhood obesity or child abuse or child trafficking? Or why don't we all, head to Washington, D.C. or the capital of Canada, Ottawa, like all the truckers did, and go, no more children will go hungry. There's enough food to feed the world. Let's stop this. We're marching on, we want our politicians to do something, but people don't do that, which is insane, because it's like, no, I'll only protest or do something when it affects me personally. If it doesn't affect me personally, I'm not going to get involved. And I found this really prevalent in The Dark and the Wounded, where a lot of people I was running into were dark and wounded, but there were no way they were changing anything. And I thought, wow, like, people are really stuck. There's a lot of people are really stuck. There's a great quote by Muhammad Ali, so I'm jumping around a bit, but it's one of my favorite quotes. And Muhammad Ali said, if you are the same person at 50 as you were when you're 20, then you've wasted 30 years of your life. And I thought, brilliant. Like, I mean, it is so true, because life is about growing. All these people, I'm protesting my rights. This is horrific. And meanwhile, I'm driving a giant truck with gas and food, and I've got everything, and I've got a giant 6-bedroom house at home, and, poor me. And you just go, that's not right. Like, it's crazy. There's a lot of people that I think don't really understand the beauty in life and how you have to slow down and really look like it's there. And growth. You need to grow. You need to break chains and break the silence and break things that have been occurring throughout history that we see as horrific. Like, I'm always just dumbfounded. I did a painting about it too, with the Sandy Hook massacre, with these children. Like, I can't even imagine these young children. A shooter goes into a school, which is so prevalent, and kills all these kindergarten children. Like, you go, oh my gosh. Yeah. And right then you go, okay, that should have been the last one, but no, it hasn't happened. Where's the protests on that? Where's the hundreds of thousands of people protesting on Washington for that one? And that's where I think the light comes in. Like, I think within that darkness, I used to think maybe I could shed more light on it, but I don't know if that will work anymore. I'm less of an optimistic person in a way, but I think what's important is to just live your life and shine your light always. Just keep in the light and keep shining it no matter what happens.
Would love to offer up to you, and I absolutely hear what you say, James. There are days that it's just even hearing 5 minutes of the news these days, you kind of like want to check the credits to make sure you're not watching a really bad Saturday Night Live skit that someone just mismarked, right? Like, please, someone slap me and wake me up. This cannot be happening. Yeah. I had a similar conversation with someone before, and they said, Cheryl, what if all the people who are behind the scenes, who are the change makers, who are protesting, who are working diligently to write congressmen and women and et cetera, if their work is having an impact, but you don't see it, but the moment all of them would stop collectively, you would really notice the difference. And I had to stop and think about that, because I do believe there's always people picking up the flame and the torch and carrying on the work. It's just we're exposed to more insanity. I think because we live in a social media, instant information, we're getting it all at once and going, can the world really be this nuts? Gosh, I have a couple of questions that came out of what you said, but I would love for you to touch on for a moment. I mentioned in your introduction that traditional galleries didn't carry your artwork, the Dark and the Wounded series. So how did you get to the point where you went, okay, I'm going to go into these places that people don't want to acknowledge, death camps or prisons or sanitariums, and I'm going to take the darkest of this work that I'm presenting and go into the darkest of places? How did you marry those, and what were you hoping, or what did happen as a result of that?
When I first started doing this, like, I don't necessarily paint for profit. Like, I've had agents and people that have tried to do things for me and rip me off and done all sorts of things in the name of money. I just wanted to show the work. I didn't care if it made money or so. I didn't expect anything to sell or go anywhere. But I approached a few galleries because I had been exhibiting in galleries, and they were just going, we can't sell this, let alone show it, because it's too dark. And people don't want to see dark. And we don't want to associate ourselves with something that dark because it poses a lot of questions. And I thought, well, that's part of the problem right there. Like, okay, so it's so crazy. So
I'm sorry, are we missing the irony in that statement?
Yeah, well, apparently they were, because it wasn't just one gallery that said that. I got hired around this time. I had probably had a dozen pieces or 15 pieces in the series. And I got hired to do work on a film that was shooting in an asylum, abandoned asylum. And it was a piece where they were using one of the cells as a prison cell or something in the scene of the movie. And they wanted someone to create a bunch of art because the prisoner who was in there for decades was an artist and loved to create. So I filled the cell with artwork. I just did a whole bunch of drawings, I think 200 or 300 or something, and filled the cell. And while I wasn't on set, I was just hanging out there, and I walked around the asylum going, oh, would this ever be cool to exhibit in? Because this is where we put people that we don't understand. When we have an issue that we don't want to look at or something that we don't want to talk about, exactly what the galleries were saying to me, this is where we put them. And we used to just put them in there and shut the doors and forget about people. And if people are challenging society or doing something, lock them up and let's not talk about it. Let's live in the little perfect bubble, and this is what we like, and we're not going to deal with this. Let's put it aside and out of sight, out of mind, sort of thing. So I thought, wow, I'm going to have an exhibit in one of these places. So I contacted the people who own the asylum, which was the government, who had, renting it out for film to make some extra money, I guess. And they said, well, we don't rent this out. This is only for film. So I said, okay, I'm making a film. And they said, oh, really? Okay. And what's the name of your studio? And I go, oh, it's Picard Studios. Oh, yeah, we film. We're doing a feature film. And they said, well, let's see the script. So I sat down, we wrote out the script, my assistant and I, and we made all these pages like, how am I going to get people in? And I thought, well, how about we do a dream sequence? We'll make a scene where it's a dream sequence and all these people show up in there. In the script, they're like wandering through this asylum like it's a exhibit. And that's how we'll bring people in, and we'll get them to sign release forms as extras, and we'll do this whole thing. And then I wasn't going to film anything because I just wanted to have a show. So a few friends of mine who were in the industry, I said, hey, can I borrow some cameras, some C-stands, some lights? Let's just make it look like a set, and we'll just bring people in. So we weren't filming it. And people just went through, and people were losing their mind. I was watching people stand in front of paintings and weep and just go, oh my God, this is my mother, or this is my, and after the first exhibit, I think it was the next day or the day after, someone contacted me, this gentleman, and he said, I was at your show, and my mother, he said, I'm gay. And when I came out of the closet, several years, back, my family completely disowned me. And he said, there was a picture of this woman in this red chair, and she's weeping. He goes, that was my mom. And I realized at that moment, looking at the painting, that it's not my fault. I did nothing wrong. She's the one. She has it inside her. It's her issue. It has nothing to do with me. He said, so after seeing your show, I picked up the phone and I called my mother. And I said, you know what? I haven't talked to you in like a decade or so. And he said, it wasn't my fault. I am who I am. And it's your darkness, your wounds that have been thrown upon me. He goes, it's not my wounds. I'm just me. And he said, we're getting together for lunch. I'm going to see my mom for the first time in 10 years. And I went, oh my God, this is beautiful. I'm onto something. I said, I should be filming this. And that's when I decided to film this for a documentary. And the more places I went into, the more I filmed and got reactions from people. And it was incredible. It was literally life-changing for me. And I know that there was many people that were really affected by the work and being in an environment where, because what I would do is the shows were always at night. I'd kill the lights, the very strategic, and you would wander around an asylum. And it wasn't just one room in the asylum. It was like the whole asylum had artwork in it. And you would just wander by yourselves throughout the asylum in this environment that many people don't have the opportunity to ever experience. And it's very opening. It's it's very just being in that building with all that pain and energy that's in there. It's palatable. So people could feel that just before they even looked at the paintings. And then the addition of the artwork and the music. I had a friend in Hollywood, Jeff Dana, who's a composer. And he gave me a soundtrack for The Dark and Wounded, which we had set up a PA system throughout the asylum. And we would play this music, which was so amazing. And he's so talented, him and his brother, Michael Dana. I think his brother won, maybe even won an Academy Award. He was nominated for one. And Jeff is just a musical genius as far as I'm concerned. And so he did the soundtrack. And when people went in that exhibit, no matter where it was, be it Philadelphia or San Francisco or New York or, Vancouver, people went in and they left very solemn. Thinking, and that's where change occurs. Change, it's not from the outside. It's got to start from within. And everyone left with this pensive, they were all looking inside themselves. And that was such a beautiful thing to me.
I would venture to say every single person who attended was very brave, because it's one thing to go to, I live in the Bay Area, and Alcatraz is such a tourist attraction, which I have not gone to because I feel it almost, commerce on other people's pain. That's just my personal choice. I just haven't done that. But to go at night and everything that you just described, it's like you created this entire ambiance, if you will, of what it would be like if you lived in that at night and you existed in that. It's one thing to walk through it, take your artwork out of it, to walk into that and, like you say, feel that palpable presence of what has happened there with people's lives, but then add your artwork that gives it a visual expression. That's pretty brave to go into that. I would love to stop for a moment. I was going to ask you towards the end, but if people want to see your film, how can they do so?
If they want to see the film, the short documentary is not available online or anything right now. I had copies that I sold originally, but right now I'm not airing it anywhere before the feature's finished.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to see it, they really can't.
Okay.
I mean, if you look on YouTube, you can come across, punch in Dark and Wounded, and you'll come across different videos and some trailers and stuff. But the film itself will be released probably. I'm in talks with the studio, so the short will be released eventually. And I know they're in talks with. I'm not too sure who it is, because this all just happened in the last 2 weeks or so, that the film said, okay, we're going to get behind this and do the feature. But it will be airing probably on TV at some point in the next year. Okay. And if they go onto the Dark and Wounded, the official darkandwounded.com, that's what the website is. You can send me a message and you can go on a mailing list and you'll get notified of when it will be airing on TV and when the feature will be coming out.
Wonderful. And I'm curious, because we've talked a lot about fear, exposing that fear and dealing with it and healing from it. So is it safe to say that when you find yourself up against fear, James, that you use art to help heal? Or are there other skill sets you've learned to help you combat it as well?
Yeah, I mean, art definitely helps creating, but I have to go back to death. I mean, death is the great equalizer. Like, we're all going to die, so why is everyone afraid? Like, people, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to do this. You're going to die. Like, you're not taking anything with you.
Yes,
like, right. It really, it's funny, but death really, I don't quite understand why people have such especially in Western culture, we have such a stigma attached to death, and people don't like to talk about it, because being alive is a beautiful thing. But I base a lot of my life on, when I started this project, I had no backing. I just used every penny I had, and people going, well, you can't just go broke, and what are you going to do, live on the street? And I go, sleep on someone's couch. I don't care. Like, I'm going to die anyway. Might as well do something that I feel is worthwhile. And I always think of death as being the great decision maker for me. Like, should I just go for it, or I'm going to die anyway? Like, so do you just play it safe and not do anything that's risky because, you might get injured or something might happen, and you go, we have this moment in time and we're fortunate to be here. And it truly is a blessing. And I don't understand why people get so, I don't know why there's a quote by Charles Bukowski, and he said, the the fact, I'm going to paraphrase this because I'll never get it right, but it's along the lines of the fact that everyone is going to die should be enough to cause everyone to care and love for each other. But we don't have the capacity to do that, So why are we stepping on people and getting as much, or, oh my God, there's a pandemic, let's take all the toilet paper and meat. Like, what the hell are you doing? Like, do you know what? Like it's so ridiculous. Like sometimes I just shake my head and go, everyone's afraid because they're afraid of what they don't know. And you're right. People do have to be brave to step into an asylum and walk through and cause something to create some inner dialogue within themselves. But that's where it all starts, and if we don't have that dialogue, change won't occur. And I feel fortunate every day that I get to be here and, talk to people like you, or I don't know, eat a nice piece of bread or enjoy a coffee or watch the wind blow or whatever. Like those are all beautiful moments, but we get caught up in the minutia of things. We get caught up in all the wrong things and we're stressed about all the things that really don't matter, and I think we really have to change our way of thinking, but whether we're capable of that, I'm not too sure. I know for sure that we have to, like you were saying, the people who shine their light, we have to keep shining those beacons in the dark, no matter what, because there are people that need to see them.
You've touched on this a couple of times, and I've mentioned, I've had this conversation with a couple of other guests as well, as far as when you don't know something, you don't know it until you know it. And it sounds, kind of basic and silly and redundant, and there's a saying that I'll paraphrase that, and I'm having a brain fart as to who said it, but when you don't know, you can't do, but when you do know, then you can do better. It's, it's all a matter of education and opening our eyes and being exposed to different cultures and events and lifestyles. And I want to ask you, because you have traveled the world and you have had your art in other places, would it be safe to say it's a very American attitude to not want to acknowledge or talk about death because we're not close to it like other countries are? They've had, war and famine and all kinds of horrific things happen throughout the centuries, whereas we've been kind of protected in our bubble here in the United States for a very long time. So it's hard to even have those conversations about death. So I guess that's my first part of the question. And then my second one is, on one of your covers on social media site, you have a picture of you walking through a cemetery. And so I'm curious what significance that holds for you. So it's kind of two questions there.
To answer the first question, I think, it's that awareness that I think in Western civilization, we don't. I have a friend who's from India, and part of his upbringing, my parents look after us, we look after my parents. We're a family. So when my parents get old and their health declines or whatever, they become top priority. Whereas a lot of other people I know, just my parents are old, let's throw them in a home. Oh, it's going to cost me money. Oh, well, it's a hassle. And we don't necessarily think the same as other people who've gone through adversity. And, the thing about awareness, John Lennon said this once. He said, the problem with awareness is once you have it, you can't go back.
Yes.
And it's so true, because once you do have that awareness of ignorance is bliss. And sometimes I would love to just hit my head with a polo mallet and just go, hey, I'm ignorant and bliss. Like I just, but when you have that awareness, it's there and you can't get rid of it. And I wouldn't want to get rid of it, because it makes, I think when you don't have awareness, you have a lesser life. People would argue with me on that, but I think you do, because you miss out on so many things. And having that awareness really makes you appreciate things that you don't necessarily always see or have access to. The second part of the question about the graveyard, oh my gosh, I love graveyards. Graveyards are so peaceful. There's a joke I used to say as a kid, why is there a fence around the graveyard? Because people are dying to get in.
Yeah.
But I used to picnic in the graveyard, paint in the graveyard, find a nice tombstone, read about who was there, try and research them. I love it because it's so quiet and peaceful. The dead are just hanging out, they don't bother you. And to me, it's just a constant reminder of death is coming for us all. And that's, again, how I sort of make a lot of my decisions, based on the fact that I'm only going to be here. Like if I make it to 85 or 90, my sister died at 21. I thought I was dead at 21, and I was living my life so recklessly at the time, because I thought, oh, well, maybe we're so close. Maybe I'm supposed to die young too, but I didn't. And every day I'm here it is truly a blessing to be here. It really is. And we should stop getting hung up on stuff and really start to look at the world as a beautiful place that we're destroying by our selfishness and our arrogance and our, being egomaniacal and thinking everything's about us. And it's really not. We're all one on the planet.
In the midst of that, is there something that makes you hopeful, James?
I'm laughing because I have to think about that. What makes me hopeful? Love makes me hopeful. I mean, I think connection makes me hopeful. There's people that I've talked to or had a conversation, and it's given me hope. When I read about, certain things that people have accomplished or done, even on a small scale, whether it be saving an animal or, it's positive, and I think we need positivity. And the stuff, there's also an expression which I found amazing. And I'm going to bring it back to what I'm talking about. It says, that a lie will go around the world 4 times before the truth has a chance to get its shoes on. And I think that's the same way with good deeds. Like, we hear about all the negative stuff and the bad stuff, and it goes out there and people just gravitate to it. But I think it's the same way. That good, it takes a while for people to understand the good. They're very happy to open up to all the horrible things in life. And it's important to see it. But it's important to balance that out with positivity and awareness and good. And when I come across people that are good, good at heart, and they're actually doing wonderful things, it's amazing to see. And I used to think with the dark and the wounded, like, if everyone had cancer and were acting in the same way that I've seen people act who've got cancer, where they stop caring about the minutiae and the bullshit of life, and they start focusing on family, friends, love, travel, the beauty of the world. I want to see the ice caps before they melt. I want to walk through the streets of Paris. I want to see the beauty of something before I go. If you could have that feeling without having cancer, how beautiful would life be? And that was sort of the attitude I had with the dark and wounded. Like, if we could actually just go inside and see what our wounds are and just start healing them, we can change the world and make it a much better place. It's funny, if you're driving in your car and it starts knocking and there's weird sounds, you stop and you go, something's wrong. I got to take my car in. If you're, wake up in the morning, you go, oh my God, my throat is swollen and I can't swallow and I got to go to the doctor, top priority. But when it comes to our own behavior in a sort of spiritual, emotional, human, people don't stop. They continue on, even though their behavior might be just as detrimental as a broken car or an illness. They don't put the brakes on and go, oh, hang on, I got to check. I got to check myself here. What am I doing? Where's my life going? How's my marriage? How's my relationship? How's my relationship with my children? How's my relationship with my coworkers, my family, my boss, my sister, my neighbor? Maybe stop and check. Who am I? Am I hurting people? Am I helping the world? Is there anything I can do to benefit myself and others? But you've got to apply the brakes and stop and check. It's crazy. It's crazy.
But I want to offer up to you, James, it is crazy. Of course it's crazy. But you know what? It goes back to, if you don't know, you don't know. And then when you know, do better. I think as human beings, we're creatures of habit, and, we love our creature comforts, etc. And it's not making an excuse for it. But I've read that you said about some of your volunteer work, and you said that volunteering is a great way to make the world a better place. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. And yet would love to know, given your early beginnings, who mirrored that for you? Because that is coming from a very generous place. And if we're talking about people not stopping and not caring and not being observant, we have to have had things mirrored to us so we can go, oh, it can be different. I can be different. I can be a giver to help heal the world as opposed to being so self-consumed with X, Y, and Z. So who mirrored that for you?
Probably my mother, I think, if I look back. My mother spent most of my childhood in survival mode. And I remember my father had beaten her up really bad one time. And I went to visit her and I couldn't even, like, her face was so swollen, it didn't even look like her.
Oh, gosh.
And I remember going, this is so wrong. And it's violence against women. And it was kind of accepted in a weird way. Like, you know, when my mother finally left and was getting a divorce, there were still people going, oh, you can't get divorced. And you go, oh my God, it's so crazy. But
yeah.
my mother, I didn't really know her until my sister died. And when my sister died, my mom had a nervous breakdown. And I started really taking care of her and connecting with her in a way that I never did when I was a child, because I was busy. I was running away from home. And when I was like 7 and 8, like I would not be around because the violence was just too bad. I was either in hiding or I was taking off, you know, sleeping in, like I lived such a crazy life. Like if I look back on it, it's pretty nuts how I survived and how I'm still here. But my mother had, you know, it's funny, she passed away just a few years ago, and even though her health was bad, she was still collecting cans for the Boy Scouts and doing things like she would help people all the time and constantly helping the elderly people in her building and just giving of herself. And it's funny because I remember before she died, I remember I was phoning people to go check on her because she lived back east, and I was getting on a plane to go see her because she was not well and she wouldn't go to the hospital. But, you know, in the end, she said to me on the phone just before, I said, Mom, you got to get to the hospital. And she said, you know, I do so much for so many people and people just don't care. Like they're still asking me for stuff when I can't even barely walk, and they're still going, can you do things for me? And I think the people that really put others first are the ones that have had adversity, and it's tricky, but I think, I don't know, this is where I'm at a bit of a puzzle. My mom, she had a great heart. She would give you the shirt off her back. Like I didn't really know her because we were all just terrified of my father and just struggled. And like, I was never home. Like even at a young age, I was just, like I said, constantly running away and getting into major trouble and all sorts of things. But once I got to know my mom, she was such an inspiration for me, you know, and other people as well, I guess, you know, when I started, you know, reading about Nelson Mandela and just different people who in life really just gave of themselves, Martin Luther King, for example, you know, and really tried to make the world a better place against a lot of odds. As soon as you start shining that light, the darkness, they want it dark.
Opposition. Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of courage to shine that light. The ones with awareness, it's our responsibility to keep shining no matter what, because you leave that legacy of light behind you. That's what you want to leave. As long as you're living your life in the light, I think that is the most important thing. And if one person or two people or three people go, I'm going to live in the light too, then great. We're beacons. We've got to shine that light. And hopefully in the darkness, people will see it.
And I will say amen to that, because we never know the effect, both positively and negatively, that we have on people. And
that's so true. True.
And if we can make it, you know, if we're conscious enough to make a choice, there's a great title to a book of Just Enough Light for the Step I'm On. And that's all we need anyway, for what to put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
I have on one of my social media sites is be the light and help others with their rocky shores, because everybody's dealing with something. Everybody has something going on, whether we see it or not. And I'd like to ask something fun at the end of my podcast. And that is, if there was a soundtrack to your life, James, what would be on it and why?
If there was a soundtrack to my life, what would be on it and why? Well, the first song that comes to mind is Revolution by the Beatles, because I think we need a revolution in a emotional, spiritual way. We need to grow as a species and change our way of thinking. Not a revolution in a way where we're violent and we need to overthrow everything, but in a way where we just change ourselves. You know, we need to look inward. That's what it's all about. So yeah, Revolution by the Beatles. George Michael, Freedom. That's a great one. Pink Floyd, Time. That's a good one too.
Good. That one of the best concerts I've been to is a Pink Floyd concert.
Brilliant. And maybe Us and Them by Pink Floyd as well, another great song. Because, you know, we tend to do that. It's always if we can make and politicians are doing this, and it's been happening, for the history of the world in a way, but it's like, if we can get people to think it's us and them, then you've always got an enemy. You've always got someone that you're always can scapegoat or use to feel better or whatever. But if you get away from the us and them mentality and you start thinking us, it changes everything, And see, how many songs do I guess? Is this like Desert Island?
No,
How about, I'll end it with the Ramones, I Want to Be Sedated. There you go. 2020, 24 hours to go. I Want to Be Sedated.
Oh my gosh. On that note, sir, Mr. James Picard, this has been a really wonderful conversation. I certainly appreciate you sharing your heart. Somehow that's just so apropos. I got to say that song.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, when you said, what would you like? A great conversation. And I think we've had just that. And that's a wonderful thing, sitting down and just talking and being real,
Yes, it is. We need many, 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 many more conversations like this. And if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Well, it's funny because I'm not out there pushing anything I just do what I love to do. And like I say, I take every day, one day at a time. And if anyone wants to get hold of me, you can just go to jamespicard.com and there's a form on there you can fill out. You asked if I have a business number, but I don't. I'm really a bit of a recluse in a way. If anyone wants to get hold of me, probably the best thing to do is just send me an email through my website, jamespicard.com, or check out my thedarkandwoundedofficial.com. Or, I'm on Facebook. They can always send me a request and I could always say yay or nay or something. I'm not a big social media person at the moment, as I find it just takes up too much time. I get too caught up in it all. But I do love posting my work, and I have a lot of people I know on Facebook that love seeing it. So that's what I tend to do.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's my sort of mode. But other than that, people can just, like I said, go to jamespicard.com and contact me and, send me a hello, and I'd be happy to reply to you. Yeah, if you have anything you want to say or whatever.
Whatever. Well, I, for one, am very blessed by the beauty that you create and that you share so generously on your Facebook. It has touched my day many, many, many times everywhere. From like I say, your very whimsical creations of your duets, or your cats giving a recital, or you posted one last night, which was just magical, the 3D, and you did a original poetry reading. And it was really, really lovely. So James, thank you for this time that you've given me today, and for sharing your story and your heart and being vulnerable and kicking our butt to get out there and just be a little bit more kind and loving and compassionate, because it is a daily choice, and it's obvious that you do that every day with the beauty that you create. So I, for one, want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. It's been a delight talking to you. Seriously, a true delight.
Well, thank you. Take care of yourself.
Okay, you too, Cheryl. Thanks again.
You're welcome. God bless. I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips in so aptly painting the picture of the fear that we're facing during this pandemic: BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. I especially want to thank Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the group for King and Country, for allowing me to use an excerpt of their song Together, which could not be a more hopeful and inspiring song for such a time as this. Finally, I'll leave you with the following from Proverbs 23:18. Surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Thank you again for joining me today. Feel free to offer feedback or a story idea at 19stories@soundsatchelstudios.com, via Instagram at CherylHollingVO. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.